This is my first response video and it's directed at Uber Hikari. He's a great YouTuber that would probably be among my top 5 analysts. I found out about him long after he stopped uploading, but his content was of such high quality that I watched a lot of his stuff. But sometimes I think he values the wrong things in a story, has poor arguments, and grades stories inefficiently. In this video, he compares Rurouni Kenshin and Yu Yu Hakusho. I'm not going to play any clips from his video because I don't want to steal content and I think you should still watch it either before or after mine. I don't agree with his grading system, but I'll follow it to show the problems of his arguments. For his points on world building, I completely agree. As I said in my seinen video, creating a world from scratch is as impressive, if not more, than working within the confines of the already existing real world. Since Yu Yu has a fantasy world and Kenshin just takes place in Japan during the Meiji era, he gave Yu Yu the win. His second category was story, and he said he grades this based on the various genres, how they blend together, and the content of the story. I agree with his point about there being no overarching narrative for Yu Yu Hakusho. While I wouldn't hold that against the story, I can see why some would. But then he talks about Yu Yu being cliché, and I think this is a bad argument. Just because something is cliché doesn't make it inherently bad. He also says shonen genre. Shonen is a demographic, not a genre. When we get to Kenshin, he says that it's not easy to say what it's about and that it has multiple genres. Let's start with the summary. He was able to summarize Yu Yu, but not Kenshin. Here are my summaries for both. Yu Yu Hakusho is about Yusuke and his friends fighting demons and growing as people. Rurouni Kenshin is about Kenshin and his friends fighting threats to Japan and themselves while growing as people. Kenshin is not that complicated. If Kenshin is complex, then so is Yu Yu. If Yu Yu is simple, then so is Kenshin. Now the genres. He says that Kenshin is shonen, romance, and historical. Allow me to correct this. Yu Yu is battle and fantasy, while Kenshin is just battle. Romance is not a big enough plot point in either of these stories to be placed in that genre. Specifically in Kenshin, the development of romance between Kenshin and Kaoru is extremely slow and unsatisfying. By the end of the Kyoto arc, there are still only hints of romance between them. It is never explicit until towards the end of the story. Plus, the amount of scenes that even have a hint of romance are few and far between. He also uses the subtitle Meiji Swordsman Romantic Story as support, but that is an empty argument. Something being in the title doesn't automatically mean that it's one of the genres. He also calls romance the primary genre, which is completely wrong. Action or battle would be the primary genre. Historical is also what I would call a skin genre. I define this as a genre that simply gives little detail on the setting. He also says samurai, which I consider another skin genre. Imagine if I said Naruto was also in the ninja genre, or One Piece was also in the pirate genre, and if I tried to use that as an argument to bring up these manga. It doesn't make sense because it's meaningless. Real countable genres should actually have important weight on the story, because in this case, if historical and samurai count, I can add supernatural, demons, or ghosts to Yu Yu's list of genres. Either way, the amount of genres in a story does not increase its quality. He then says that Kenshin's emphasis is on his psychological development rather than his adventures as a samurai, which I completely disagree with. The story frequently brings up the thread of Kenshin trying to atone, but the story, like many other great battle manga, is focused on the physical and the mental journey. And in most cases, including this one, the physical journey takes up more screen time and importance. There are more scenes focused on action and saving the day than there are on Kenshin's psychological state and his desire for atonement. He also says that the narrative form is more complex than Yu Yu. Before looking at anything he says, this is simply not true. I have an entire video on how Yu Yu and Kenshin share the same formula for creating arcs. In both of these stories, the first arc is made up of different sub-arcs with minor enemies. The next arcs all are a focused story with one main antagonist and their followers. The followers and other enemies are fought in the middle of the arc and the main antagonist is fought at the end. The protagonist wins an ideological battle against the antagonist before winning. That's it. And if you want to get specific, the Kyoto arc is made up of training, traveling, and fighting. That's it. I skipped a little in the Jinchu arc, but I'm pretty sure it was a flashback, then a chain of fights against the Six, then a break, then a chain of fights leading to the final battle. The Chapter Black Saga is more complex than either of these arcs. There are several fights spaced out with progress towards the plans of both sides. Then the Three Kings Saga and Dark Tournament Saga are as complex as Kyoto or Jinchu. And finally, the Spirit Detective Saga is more complex than the Tokyo arc. Tokyo is simple episodic action until the Oni Waban. The Spirit Detective Saga has Yusuke solving things as a ghost, then has a tournament event, then has a big confrontation event, then has a rescue event. He says Kenshin revolutionized the narrative form. In truth, Yu Yu revolutionized battle manga antagonists, and Kenshin reinforced that revolution. So in terms of story, Yu Yu Hakusho has a decisive victory. His next section is characters. His analysis in Yusuke and Toguro is pretty spot on and is a display of why I enjoy his content. For Kenshin, he says that he's psychologically complex because he is split between Himura Kenshin and Batosai the Manslayer. I agree with this, but then he says that Kenshin reverting into Batosai shows that he's not willing to take the moral responsibilities of his killings. I disagree with this. Kenshin is all about not killing, while Batosai is all about killing. When Kenshin reverts into Batosai, it's him unconsciously admitting that he needs to kill to win, which is why he hates reverting to that form. Every time he becomes Batosai, he gets stronger and fights more violently. Part of Kenshin's internal journey is becoming strong enough as Kenshin so that he doesn't need to become Batosai to win. I did not see any hints towards his interpretation when watching the anime. Maybe they're in the manga, but I doubt it. Later in the video, he agrees with my point, saying Kenshin starts on his journey of psychological transformation to prove his existence can be more than having to rely on Batosai to have the power to protect his friends. So I don't know where his first interpretation came from. His following analysis of the symbolism of the Sakabato and Kenshin's fight against Cho is amazing. The ethical limitation and challenge against Kenshin was great, but then he goes into the cliche of thinking that subversion or aversion of tropes is equal to quality. Kenshin subverting the trope of dying for your friends and to living for your friends is nice, but it is not automatically better just because it's a subversion. This specific element is executed just okay, so it's definitely not something worth bringing up. It's only really brought up in one episode if I remember correctly. The analysis of the symbolism of all this is good though. He then goes into his own interpretation of how Kenshin cannot atone for his sins, but as someone who hasn't consumed every page or dialogue of the Kenshin canon, I can't verify if what he's saying is true. By Uber's own definition, Kenshin can't atone, but Watsuki may have his own definition of atonement and allowed Kenshin to achieve that. Then soon after, he quotes Kenshin's way of atoning, which is, by using the sword in my heart in my struggling life. Therefore, Kenshin did find a way to atone within the manga's beliefs, so bringing up that Kenshin couldn't atone was an empty argument. Finally, he says the one reason that Kenshin wins is because his development parallels the philosophical argument about the nature of humanity. This is just like the deep argument. I even have a video proving that if Eva is deep for referencing religion and philosophy, then Naruto is just as deep, and most people who adore deep stories wouldn't call Naruto deep. Ultimately, being deep is irrelevant to the quality of a story. It just gives the fans bragging rights. Having a valuable message is much more important, and that actually increases the quality of a story. So, he gives the points to Kenshin, which I would as well, but only because of the dual personality. Yusuke has symbolism in his character growth as well, like his true powers being unlocked when he shed his tough persona against Toguro. Then he says that Hunter x Hunter is the best ongoing manga, which was in 2012. Seeing how he exaggerates little things like psychology, deep themes, or multiple genres, and thinks that cliches are negative, it's easy to see how he'd think that. His last category is secondary characters, which is anyone outside of the main group of heroes. His grading system is on how these characters develop and how they add depth to the story. He praises Yu Yu by saying that it is one of the only manga where most of the characters get some kind of development. I like Yu Yu, but this is a lie. The same thing can be said about any of the big three, Fairy Tail, Black Clover, Hero, or Kimetsu. His next argument is about the three characters, Yusuke, Koenma, and Sensui. He says that Koenma is revealed to be not as morally straight as we thought he was. Also that Sensui is a justifiable villain. And finally, Yusuke is put into an ethical dilemma between the two. I don't understand what his point was here. This is an interesting dynamic, but it is not the best way to show how secondary characters add depth to a story. This is just a dynamic between characters. Then his next example is of the Three Kings saga. He says that there are 4 levels of characterization. Individual, the rivalry between friends, the individual and the one who called them there, and then the duos versus each other. I disagree with this on 2 levels. The first is that there is no rivalry between Yusuke, Hiei, and Kurama in this arc, eliminating his second level. Then there is no rivalry between the duos, eliminating the 4th level. This may be different in the manga, but again, I doubt it. The 3 kings all want to become king and prepare for war, but they barely even speak to or address each other. My second level of disagreement is that I believe that this shows nothing. Even if the dynamic existed exactly as he said, he's exaggerating the worth of the dynamic. He's comparing 2 shows with 4 metrics, and one of them is character dynamics? That makes no sense. Overall, this category seems to be irrelevant. He calls this intricate characterization, but it's not. These are decent dynamics. Characterization is the creation or construction of a fictional character. Creating relationships is part of characterization, but it's not characterization itself. For Kenshin, he says that each villain serves 3 purposes: internal development, theme of violence, and conceptual piece of a puzzle towards the philosophical argument. This part actually sort of makes sense to grade, but why he didn't grade Yu Yu the same way is a mystery. I agree with the first and third purposes, but I don't think the second purpose is necessary, as it sounds like the same thing as a third. So several villains further Kenshin's internal development and act as an ideological battle. But the same thing can be said about Yu Yu. Toguro, Sensui, Sniper, Ryzen, and Yomi all do at least one of these things. And Seaman develops Kuwabara, while Game Master and older Toguro develop Kurama. I'm sure I could say more if I rewatched it, but Yu Yu and Kenshin are essentially equal when it comes to what the secondary characters accomplish. But since Yu Yu has more of these villains that do this, the point would logically go to Yu Yu. Uber gives this point to Kenshin. And just to hammer home an earlier point, notice how much the both of us spoke about action in comparison to romance in these videos. That should easily show you that action is the primary genre. I remember watching this video either before or during my watch of Kenshin and being upset because his description of Kenshin made it sound like I was about to watch some high-level writing, but instead, I got a story that was another good battle manga. As you can see, Uber Hikari tends to exaggerate minuscule things, put a misguided focus on depth and philosophy, and have double standards that might be blinded by nostalgia. I personally don't even agree with his grading system, but following it, I came out with Yu Yu having 7 points and Kenshin having 3. My problem with this video isn't his conclusion, but what arguments he used to get there. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, and check out my manga for free online. If you enjoy my content, please consider donating to my Patreon. All important links will be in the description.